Welcome to episode 1 of Life's Short, the podcast about interesting people who died before their time. My name's Ella Kitt, and for the very first episode, we're covering the life of 1960s it girl Edie Sedgwick.
Now, you are a superstar, or you want to be a superstar. What is the difference between a star and a superstar?
It's two things. One is a joke, and the other is possibly a real superstar.
She was beautiful and rich. She had bleached blonde hair and wore fur coats and statement earrings. She was Andy Warhol's muse. She inspired lyrics to a Bob Dylan song. She was cool girl personified. Edie Sedgwick was born in Santa Barbara, California in 1943. The Sedgwicks were a wealthy family, but Edie's childhood was far from idyllic. Her father, sculptor Francis Minturn Sedgwick, was abusive and had multiple affairs over the course of his marriage to Edie's mother. In the early 1940s, Francis bought a 3,000-acre ranch in Santa Barbara, California. On the ranch, the Sedgwick children lived under the shadow of their father's domineering presence and were, for the most part, isolated from other kids. Under the supervision of their nurse, Edie and her two sisters lived in their own house on the property, separate from their parents. Edie developed anorexia and bulimia by age 13, around the time she was sent to the prestigious Northern California boarding school, the Branson School. She was quickly sent home after teachers discovered her eating disorder, and once she returned home, her father kept her sedated with various medications and frequently locked her in her room. 2 years later, Edie's parents made a second attempt at sending her away to boarding school. She attended St. Timothy's, an all-girls private school in Stevenson, Maryland. But soon after she began attending St. Timothy's, her parents noticed that her mental health was declining, and she was uprooted from her new school and sent to 2 psychiatric facilities. When she left the psychiatric ward in 1963, she moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts to study art with her cousin. In Cambridge, she made sculptures and socialized with Harvard students. It was during this period that Edie's brother Minty committed suicide. Her older brother Bobby would die shortly after in January of 1965 when he drove his motorcycle into the side of a bus. Edie was devastated by the deaths of her 2 brothers. In 1964, she received an $80,000 trust fund from her grandmother and moved to New York. Here, Edie met pop art pioneer Andy Warhol. They hit it off, and she went on to star in 18 of Warhol's films, most famously Poor Little Rich Girl. For a while, Warhol and Edie were inseparable. Here's a clip of the two on the Merv Griffin show, where Edie is literally speaking for Andy.
Oh, I must warn you, Andy won't say a word.
Why?
He's not used to making really public appearances, so I think he'll whisper answers to me if you ask him a question.
Can I listen while he whispers?
I'll whisper to you.
Aren't you going to say one word, Andy?
Their relationship, however, was short-lived, lasting only about a year. Edie became friends with Bob Dylan, who hated Warhol. She began a relationship with singer-songwriter Bob Newworth, a friend of Dylan's. On top of this, Edie wanted to start a real film career and leave Warhol's underground movies behind. But instead, in 1965, she disappeared from the public eye altogether. As drugs consumed her, she left behind her growing celebrity. When in 1966 she burned down her apartment, her parents tried to admit her to another psychiatric ward, but she left shortly after she was admitted. Newworth severed ties with Edie in 1967. In 1968, she survived a drug overdose and moved back in with her mother. In 1967, she married Michael Post, a man she met at Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital when she returned to California in 1968. Michael was only 20 while she was 28. 4 months after they married, Edie overdosed and died in her sleep. a tragic ending to a life of constant inner turmoil. Her death would stop her from reaching her dream of stardom. That's it for the first episode of Life Short. See you next time.